What is going on, everybody? Justin Thomas here, along with the great In Deep Geek, Robert from In Deep Geek, to talk some Game of Thrones, some Song of Ice and Fire. Thank you so much for coming on, Robert. If you'd like to tell anybody that happens to be living under a rock where they can find you, go ahead and do your shameless plug.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be on here as always. Yeah, my channel is In Deep Geek. If you're into Game of Thrones or Westworld or a few other shows I'm going to be covering, please just go and check it out. And I'm on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and all the rest of it. Just look for In Deep Geek and you'll find me.
Awesome. Yeah, I wanted to have Robert on because Robert told me during one of the YouTube confidential segments that the best way to go about doing content is maybe investigating some stuff that you're not sold on yourself. So I'm kind of living by Robert's word here. And I was always wondering about the knighthood in Westeros in general. We obviously know the origins, which I'll have Robert kind of give a quick rundown, but it all comes back to the gods in the end. But why are the Northerners so adamant against knighthood? Is there any benefits to that? What are the pros? What are the cons? How does the crown see this and so forth, since they technically can't be Kingsguard and there's never been a Northern Kingsguard from what I know? Do they see that as kind of malicious or unloyal and so forth? And just to see what the general warrior classes say about them culturally, religiously, and so forth, and how it will affect them in the wars to come. Robert, would you like to tell everybody so brilliantly just quick rundown of why we have no knights in the north? Well, very few. I'm sorry, I should correct myself. Very few.
Yeah, I mean, this is down to geopolitics, really, at the end of the day. So the knights came in, we think, with the Andal invasion of Westeros, which took over the south, but it did not take over the north. And the north has remained with the first men independent, as it were, for such a long time. They've retained their own religion, they've retained their own culture, they've not been invaded. They have bent the knee to the Targaryens to become part of the Seven Kingdoms, because basically they got threatened with dragons and it was the only sensible thing to do. But the contact, even after that, the contact between the north and the rest of Westeros has actually been minimal. If you think about the geography of it, we've got the neck, and there is only one road which goes up, the King's Road, which goes from the south to the north, and there is one main harbour, White Harbour, which is a route into the north. But most parts of the north do not have contact with the south at all. And so within that context, why should there be knights in the north is the bigger question, because the knights were a thing which was in the south, and the north has resisted all parts of southern culture, not just the knights. So that's why we're in the situation we're in.
And essentially the Northerners, and feel free to correct me at any time, it is my stream, Robert, but you are definitely the expert in the Game of Thrones and Song of Ice and Fire area. It's the Southerners have more Andal blood, and the Northerners have more of the First Men blood, and then in Dorne you have more of the Rhoynish culture and ethnicity per se.
Yeah, that's broadly right. There are mixes, and there are some First Men down in the south, but broadly speaking, the north are First Men, and then most of the middle part is where the Andals came in, and then the Dawn is actually a bit of a mixture between, and there's a sort of big political stuff in the books about this between Andals and Rhoynish. So there's a sort of a mix going on there.
Your salty Dornish and so on, and sandy, and yeah, I am not trying to make a blanket statement about any Dornish people, just so you know, keeping it PC here. So I already see in the comments, and this is the first thing I think a lot of people go to, is that, you know, North are Hardmen, you know, per se, so they don't need a title to tell them that they have the you know, ability to fight and ability to be a hard man, a fighting man, a warrior. I see that to a point, but there's something to be said for the knights that do compete in the tournaments. And if we just go to real history, the before Agincourt, the famous tournament knights and all that, they were feared, and they were fearsome warriors, and they were very, a lot of them would go on crusade, and the skills that they practice in the melee and in the tournaments were no joke. And Dunk and Egg, I think, is a really good, I think, well, obviously it's essentially Brienne and Podrick, blanket statement there, running around together, you know, on some adventures. But it's a good example of a hedge knight, which is kind of a demeaning term and not really the term that you would use there. I think they'd be referred to as like a marauder or just going around. A hedge knight refers to somebody that is sleeping under a hedge and so forth. Of course, they're not landed or anything like that. But I love the Tales of Dunk and Egg, and we get to see the dangers right away in the first novella. We see a death, and Dunk feels terrible about this, and he's haunted by it. And we also see that there are situations for the knights as well, that they're not just all privilege, that Dunk literally cannot lose his armor. And this was true in real life as well, because you could not afford to get that armor back a lot of times if you were not a rich knight. A lot of these southern warriors would become knights, and they would become knights through the system, of course, the page and then the squire and so forth, and there's different ways to go about it. But there are a lot of cases, and George R.R. Martin's also been quoted on this, saying that he doesn't want everybody to believe that every squire is a 13 to like 17-year-old boy, that there are squires in their 40s, and there are squires, and this is true to real life as well, from the studying I've done, that there are squires that never become knights for the fact that they do not have the money to go forth with the knighthood, and it's not advantageous to make a career out of being a squire. There's something to be said for, I think that he definitely subverts the white knight trope, but I was talking to Robert about this earlier briefly, and I said, I don't think that having the North stray from the knighthood is actually an example of this, or a conscious decision on George's part to try to further that, the whole real warriors aren't knights, because every example of what a character that embodies true chivalry or knighthood, per se, the characteristics that you would associate with a noble knight in the book series are not knights. They're, you know, the Hound redeems himself eventually. Brienne is a great example. So I don't think the North is an example of that. I think that the North is more just an example, like Robert says, and which I find very interesting. It's just such a different atmosphere up there. Would you think it's fair to say that if there was more to gain up north as far as valuable land, because part of being a knight is hopefully you'll get some land under your lord's house, and there was maybe more, you know, rich farmland and stuff like that where they could have some actual people working on their plantation and so forth, that there would be maybe more of a allure and more of it, maybe more temptation to the North, because we do see some Northerners go for the knighthood, and Jorah in particular. And then you have Sir Roderick. So, I mean, it's not like they can't do it. Do you think that if there was more to gain fiscally, or, you know, by gaining more land that was more valuable, like the Reach is very rich, it's very good soil, do you think there would be more Northern Knights, Robert? Or do you think it is truly just a sticking to their guns on the old gods thing?
I think that what we have particularly with Jorah is somebody who was made a knight for what they did in battle. So he was made a knight for when he was doing the siege or the invasion of Pike, and so he was made a knight, and so that was a thing that happened to him. I'm sure he had a choice. He could have said, no, I don't want that, but given the situation, it probably just was a polite thing to do. It made very little difference to him in terms of his status, because he was, of course, the heir to Bear Island. So actually, that made no difference whatsoever to his status. It didn't give him any prospect of any extra lands or anything like that. That made very little difference to him. I think that in terms of, is there a greater allure there? I think I come back to this point of the geopolitics, is that it just is not an issue for people in the North. That they have not got to this concept of you could become a knight. And being made a knight has this so many years and centuries of traditions as to who can make somebody a knight and all the rest of it. Lords can only make somebody a knight if they are already a knight, so technically Ned couldn't even knight someone if he wanted to. So there's a whole series of these bizarre rules. I just think they think it doesn't make any difference to us, to our way of life. It doesn't give us any advantage. Only when you get people who are going from the north down south and they see that within the south that gives them some advantage, that is the point at which they might think, yes, this could be helpful for me. But I would also pick up on the point you made a moment ago, which is that becoming a knight gives or grants a level of respectability and sort of a move up the social scale, as it were, but it also brings with it a number of costs. So you don't immediately earn money from getting this promotion. In fact, it probably would cost you money to get this promotion, because you've got to buy your horse and you've got to buy your armor and all the rest of it. So the allure isn't there, and I think the allure would only be there if the North got more integrated with the rest of the Seven Kingdoms.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's just that it seems that, especially in this culture, I mean, all the great fighters, and now I always think it's cool to hear, like, even though it's just in the show, but how Ramsay says to Jon, oh, I've heard you're the greatest, you know, swordsman in all the Seven Kingdoms and so forth. This allure of being a warrior, and we do see this in Bran before he has his accident, which was not Jaime's or Cersei's fault, you know, but he is, it's both in the books and in the show that he speaks about becoming a knight briefly. And now, is that a possibility because he is got the Tully blood? He does have the Tully blood as well. Would that be something that would be accepted by House Stark and so forth? I mean, when you think of all the warriors that are famous in the Seven Kingdoms, I mean, they're all knights. I mean, so you can't, I don't know. I mean, you definitely can do anything you want and say anything you want, but it seems like you're dead set on that there's no allure to this. You would think that for especially the adolescent, that there would be such a drive to want to be a famous Kingsguard, to want to be a famous warrior. I mean, how many famous warriors can we name that aren't knights in A Song of Ice and Fire? And you're probably going to prove me really wrong here and name a million. But, you know, I feel confident in saying there's definitely more that are knights. And does that mean they're better fighters? No, because essentially, what did Ned go through? The same system that a knight would go through. He was a ward in the Vale, who supposedly have the best knights. And I'm assuming that his lifestyle there with his brother Brandon was much like a page's would be, that the system, I mean, they wouldn't change it just for them. So he had to do the duties of what a page would do. He had the same training of a knight. I think that the only difference is he doesn't compete in tournaments. And like you said, you know, when you're already a lord like Jorah, who won it in battle, and as he says, I believe both in book and show, is that all he could think about is how bad he had the piss when he was getting knighted. So, you know, he wasn't, yes, too thrilled about it, but that's also somebody that's already, you know, the big shot of Bear Island and, you know, for the time being. So what would it be for maybe somebody that was from House Serwyn or something like that? You know, a armored horseback rider for, you know, per se, like House Serwyn of the North, and he gets a chance at knighthood. That's probably going to be a little bit more alluring. I had to think in this type of society, in this warrior class, where all these stories about Arthur Dane, the Sword of the Morning, and all these famous knights, that, you know, there would have to be some temptation and some feeling of, I don't know, just being left out to a point. I mean, you can't join the Kingsguard, but I guess you can go to the Wall.
Well, picking up on the fame point first, you're right that the most famous fighters, I would say, in the world that are there are knights. And I think that there are two reasons for that. First of all, there are far more people in the south than in the north. But secondly, and I think probably equally as importantly, George R.R. Martin is next level with the way that he writes this, and he has the history of it that we learn about is being learned about through the scribes, through the maesters, who are themselves caught up within the Seven Kingdoms and with the faith of the Seven, and that is their reference point. So they are going to be telling the stories more about the people from the south. There are not as many maesters who go up north at all, so for them to be recording history is quite a rare thing, northern history. So what you find, and I think it's right when you're talking about the allure starts to get there. We do start to see a few signs of it when you had Bran, who did want to be a knight, and that was because he had some exposure to it. Similarly, Sansa, with the female equivalent, wanting to be a lady of court, wanting to be queen. Those were things that 2 or 3 generations earlier Starks would not have thought about, because that they were completely cut off from the rest of it. And it's actually, and I'm going to be doing a video on this at some point when I'm talking about the build-up to Robert's Revolution, the central character in all this is Ned's father, Rickard Stark. He was the one who turned House Stark to look to the south, to actually try and engage in southern politics. So before that turning point, Starks didn't care at all about it. And I think when we were talking about Ned, when you say he doesn't participate in tournaments, I think that was actually a very deliberate thing he says at one point when he's saying to Jaime that he doesn't want other people to know his strengths and weaknesses. He sees that therefore this gives him an edge in battle, because he sees the only point of fighting is to be actually in a battle, not to be gaining some sort of honor by doing a pretend fight, as it were, against other people. He just does not see the point of that. And we similarly find that Northerners are largely absent from all of the tourneys that we hear about. So it's not just a Ned Stark thing. This is a Northern thing that they just do not see the point in going down there and just like jousting to try and win some money.
Well, to that note, though, we do see that, I mean, in both real life and in A Song of Ice and Fire, especially in the novellas, that, I mean, the melee is a very... now, I will say that, is there any reason to be killing each other in those melees? No. But it's not all fake fighting. And I have this kind of stance on Ned, and I think that it's kind of going to be more clear in the books that Ned is not as great of a fighter. You know, it's made clear, you know, Bloodraven says it pretty clearly, in the when they are having the vision of the Tower of Joy, when he says, "Oh, he's better than my father." He's like, much better, you know, even though he shows to be a formidable foe. But I think that there's a little bit of bullshit to Ned too, when he says that when I fight a man, I want to fight. I think that, yes, there's some truth to that, but I think that he's in also like a really advantageous position to be taking this higher stance on this whole knighthood thing. Because again, people do die in these tourneys, and the only issue I have with the whole, it's just so hard for me to believe with all these famous, and you're right, you know, like the history is written by the maesters, and that's a good question. Now, what Lewin, he's not he doesn't follow the old gods, does he?
No.
Okay, so no maesters follow the old gods.
Not as far as I'm aware. There might be one somewhere, but generally speaking, the maesters are very much tied in with the faith of the Seven, or indeed beyond the faith of the Seven, to the point at which they see religion as being largely irrelevant.
Yeah, they have a lot of skewed opinions on a lot of things. But well, you know, you talk about Ned's family, and talk about his father in his southern ambitions, and I'm looking forward to that video. And I love the whole you know, theories that go around, that circulate around that. And I think that Robert Baratheon speaks to this to a point too, when he makes the fist metaphor about how they need a standing army. Don't you think that if we can shift away from me trying to prove that the North aren't as hard as they say they are, and they're kind of hiding behind this to a point, and it's kind of cool to say, because I do believe that to a point. I think that it's, you know, George does write very realistically, as you say, and I think there's some truth that, you know, not having to go and compete in these melees and being like, when I fight somebody, it's for real. But, you know, don't tell anybody that he got stabbed in the back of the throat. But was there any truth? I mean, there's definitely truth behind the centralized government that they have an issue with. The King's Landing is so centralized, it's an issue. And they don't have a standing army because they have these vast differences in cultural, you know, structure, in their political structure, in their beliefs. You know, it's really an issue, not only with the North, who they say is too large and, you know, and too wild to, you know, actually maintain. They couldn't if they wanted to, but the South as well, with Dorne, and who has their own issues. So, I mean, do you think that there's a little bit of issue, especially, like I said, you know, I think that it would say something. Think about England back during the War of the Roses. What if York the Duke of York refused to protect the crown or something like that. There would be some issues there because, you know, the Starks are based after, obviously, the, you know, the Duke of York and so forth. So he was very much so a knight and very much so about taking care of business in Ireland and Scotland, and went down to London to take care of business. Just didn't realize the Queen, you know, was more savvy than he thought. So it's this whole idea of this very centralized, very isolated government, and in these cultures that clash so much within the Seven Kingdoms that it has to weaken them. And like I said, like I don't see how they don't see that as kind of a problem, that they have houses that are sworn to them, but they can't technically be a part of their Kingsguard.
Yeah, so the interesting thing, obviously, is that the Targaryen invasion that we talk about was 3 Targaryens sat on a dragon each. That was what it was. And so that was effectively their army. They had that there were a couple of other families, the Valarans and so on, who came with them, but they did not start with a massive army. And they never did amass this huge army. They had their home on Dragonstone, and then there's this area of the Crown Lands, which is sort of not hugely anything really, and King's Landing. And King's Landing has its own defensive troops. We get the Gold Cloaks, but they're not an army to go off fighting. So the whole point in the way that they'd set it up as a structure was that all the different areas kept their armies, and underneath each of those areas there were, like, so you get the ruling house in, say, the north, as we were talking about it. The Starks have their own army, and then the Starks can call the banners, and then they call the Boltons and Karstarks and all the rest of it. And then the Karstarks call on their smaller lords, and so everybody sort of contributes up the pyramid. And that's the way that it works. And that worked for as long as the Targaryens had dragons, because everybody was scared of the dragons. When it fell down, it was because they did not. And so the Targaryens did not have this huge standing army that they could move about all over the place. They were then suddenly very reliant on all of the other houses coming to support them. And as we saw, the tipping point there was where House Lannister were going to be going. So there's yeah, it's an interesting concept, but we should point out, the Targaryens, they weren't these great champions of either the Faith of the Seven, with 1 or 2 exceptions, or knights as a concept. They largely just stuck to doing their own thing. The occasional one would be interested in the wall or whatever, but they were there just trying to do their dragon stuff. It wasn't that they were hugely bought into this idea of the knighthood or the faith that supports the knighthood.
Yeah, from what I understand, they picked up the Faith of the Seven as a, hey, I'm going to go with the flow type deal, and I don't want to piss. Like, that was the best way to go. That ruffled the least amount of feathers for the Targaryens. And I love what you said about the dragons, because with the Targaryens, it seems to me it's so funny and ironic that the most dangerous Targaryens are the ones without the dragons, it seems. They're the ones that are always on the rampage. The ones with the dragons, it's like they have their security to a point, and yes, they can cause havoc and take care of business, but they seem to be more stable. You know, it's when they're trying to get the dragons and they feel obviously threatened because they don't have their safety blanket, which is a pretty damn good safety blanket. It's a dragon. But the ones that were very religious, that didn't end up too well for them by any means. I think that both times that when you have highly religious Targaryens, that ends terribly for them. I think they're all out. There's no middle ground for Targaryens. They're either full on mad about something, or they don't care about it. But I think that when you look at Westeros as a whole, and you consider like what another prominent knight and a proven commander had done, when we're talking about if the faith really dictates, like in what you said, the Targaryens, they just didn't want to ruffle feathers. They weren't particularly into the Seven. They weren't particularly into the whole knighthood or any of that. They're just into their dragons and holding their seat and trying to keep it. But Dragonstone is part of the Crown Lands technically, and you have a proven battle commander in Stannis, And just for the hell of it, I would state that if George wanted to write Wins the Winner in one chapter and Stannis wins the Iron Throne, I'd be fine with it. Done with this. Seriously, I'm done with the story because he's a rightful heir. And I'm just cool with it. I love me some Stannis, especially book Stannis. But we look at him, we look at his change of faith. And do you think that his change of faith is the main reason people went to Renly? Or do you think that it was just Renly was that much more likable? Or do you think it was the sticking point of that he did go to the, Red God? Which, just to point out, I mean, it is only God that's brought people back to life. That's, if you need a selling point on religion, for me, I'm going with that God. I mean, I'm not for the whole burning of children and all that, but it seems that he doesn't have a lot of support. Is that because he's not liked? Or is that because of the change in religion from the Seven? Or is the Reach and the Stormlands really that religious and spiritual?
Yeah, so my take on Stannis is it was a lot of factors. Renly was there in King's Landing, and he was the one who was talking to Ned, and he rushed back straight away with his plan, and he was a charismatic figure. So I think that first of all there was a difference in charisma between the two of them. Secondly, I think he acted first. Stannis sat around on Dragonstone for a long time, and Renly went around and tried to rally all the troops. Thirdly, he clearly played the political game. He went over and got the Tyrells on side, and that was very important. And the moment when you're playing this game of who's going to be the next king or queen, you have to see who has got the power to be able to do that. And once you've got the Renly there with the vast majority of the soldiers in the Stormlands on his side, as well as in the Reach and the Tyrell army, that suddenly turns into quite a significant force. And so people would naturally flock to the more significant force. And yes, I think Stannis probably didn't win any friends by burning the statues of the Seven and by abandoning that faith and all the rest of it. I think that there was an awful lot of stuff there that people probably didn't like. But from a realpolitik perspective, if he had been successful to start with, people would have ignored it and they would have just gone with him. But he was too late. He wasn't as charismatic and pushing for it, and to be frank, yes, he has got a better claim, but the strength of the claim is entirely dependent on who you believe in the first place. So why not Renly?
Well, because Robert, that's absolutely for so many reasons, and I don't say that. Renly, no, Stannis is a rightful heir, but no, you're completely right that he sat around really, and he just expected people would just flock to him. I assume, because he's so honor bound and he's so by the book, and the burning of the gods, the old gods, even if it's just totems, shows an extra level of being unstable as well, that probably didn't ring too true with all of the other people that were maybe thinking about backing him. But I think that Renly was politicking before Robert was even dead with the Tyrells and so forth, and I think that Stannis was really hoping for like everybody to have a Ned Stark mentality. Everybody just be like, this is my mentality, like go to Stannis, he's the one, ignore everything, it's just the way it is. But I think it's interesting that with the Starks in their possible southern ambitions, and also when you look at the Vale, who are really, really loyal to the north, but they also have this very, very strict way of actually holding to the knighthood and holding to the Seven. They are considered to be the best knights in the realm, and there are the hill tribes there that fought for the Lannisters that are truly for the old gods, and they do stick to their guns and so forth. And I noticed that there's a lot of turmoil up north as well, not only with just the whole issue of differences with the rest of the realm, but would you say it's fair that there's more infighting in the north than there is in the rest of the realm? I mean, there's a lot of issues. There's the Boltons, I mean, really, they got the Manderleys that, yes, are always, you know, obviously loyal to them, and they are financially tied up with. But there is always, it seems to be a lot of infighting throughout history, you know, not even just recent history, but always up north, even with the Karstarks and so forth. And then you have the extra annoyance of the Vikings or the Iron Islanders. Would you say that the north has the most turmoil overall? Is that a fair assessment?
Well, I'll just very quickly go back to what I said a moment ago. When I say why not Renly, I was doing that from the perspective of people deciding who to join up, not who I think is a more legitimate claimant. But in terms of the North being more at war with itself, I have to say I don't see it. I think that if you look back over history, certainly if you look back at the history of the last 300 years since the Targaryens have been there's so many of the battles have been down in the south. There's been all of the different Blackfire rebellions and the Nine Penny Kings and the Dornish wars, and we get the Iron Island invasions and rebellions, and this is all happening in the south. And in the north, it was kept relatively tight by the Starks. Now, so in recent history, I would say no. It's happened a lot more in the south, and generally speaking, if I had to say the area where the most battles seem to have taken place, it's the Riverlands. It's in the middle where everybody is fighting over. But earlier on, then I think that it's probably roughly the same. If you go to the north, what you'll see is that the Starks haven't held complete control over the north ever since Bran the Builder. They slowly but surely worked their way to controlling it all, and that meant kicking some people out. That meant putting their own relatives into some seats in various places, with like the Karstarks, for example. And so it was a series of rebellions and wars and fights there, but I don't think it was any more than there was in the south. What there is in the north, I would suggest, is although they have forgotten an awful lot, they have got lots of very long memories about grudges from thousands of years ago. So the Karstarks and the Boltons and all the rest of it, they have still got grudges from millennia ago, in a way that in the south it's less often the case. There are some examples, but not quite as many of these incredibly long grudges, rivalries, which have just carried on boiling to the surface every now and then sort of going back down.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, obviously the Blackfire rebellions, and then which the last one being the Nine Penny Kings. I look at those as more obviously outside intrusions. Those are invasions of sorts, a challenge to the crown from the bastards. But also, it's funny that you brought that up, because I mean, especially when you look at the Tullys and the Blackfish in particular, and even Hoster, that there was such a large amount of bonding that seemed to happen between the knights during that whole ordeal, during the last rebellion. You even have the Mad King with Tywin Lannister, with the Blackfish, with and it seems that Roderick Stark, where is he during this? It seems like not being a part of the knighthood again, or I don't know where he was geographically, or what was going on. But all you hear, there's a certain amount of brotherhood that these warriors have from that last Blackfire rebellion, the old guard per se. Because I think if you look at the ones that still participated in the War of the Five Kings, they all together had been in 5 wars, if you look at it realistically. So I mean, that's a hell of a lot of wars. But there's the Blackfish is famous for his ability for reconnaissance, for his ability to manipulate a battlefield and really control a battlefield. Like he's oddly not willing to fulfill his knightly duty of marrying, so they can continue on this tradition of knighthood, because like you said, only a knight can make somebody else a knight, and there's all these different theories on that. But he stays true to the whole protecting of the family and protecting of the weak, to a point with he's either in the Riverlands or he's at the Vale, protecting Lysa. So, I mean, where were the Starks for the last Blackfire rebellion? You hear all these stories and all this bonding went down during this, and all these legends were born out of that. You know, Barristan Selmy, you know, it was like the only one that really outshined the Blackfish per se, but you get no Stark stories and all this. And maybe this again is another example of what you're saying with the Maesters.
Yeah, it is to a certain extent, but it's also that the North have just isolated themselves, and with a lot of, and we also forget about the geography of Westeros. It's a really big place, and so if you've got a battle which is happening down somewhere near King's Landing, which is where a lot of these kind of Blackfire rebellions were going on, then it would take weeks for a force to come from the north all the way down to the south. So first of all, they would have to rally the forces. You know, you have to get the message up to start with, then they'd have to rally all their forces, and then they'd have to get all of their forces down to the south. This is going to take months in order to do that. So if you are going to try and quash a rebellion early, which was what was happening increasingly as they went on, trying to, with Bloodraven, trying to see where the threats were coming from and squash them before they could actually turn into anything real, then you just needed to have the forces who were close by. So I think the Starks are very happy to stay out of it. Why on earth would they want to get involved in a war that was actually not much to do with them? And secondly, frankly, it would take too long to get everybody there.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess that just goes along with this degree of separation that if I were to be on the Iron Throne, which I would do a pretty damn good job, I would have an issue with the North. It seemed, I mean, everything you're saying is true, but it also rings true that it's like, hey, these bastards don't. I guess it's kind of like what Robert says, that they could never control it, so it's like they need to be taking care of the mess up there. And I guess they're not too worried about having them come down and be Kingsguard or every time a Blackfire washes up on the steps. But what about, I do have a few particular questions. I don't want to make this too long, to pick your brain a little bit. In the book, John has a few pages from the Free Folk when he becomes Lord Commander. What is the deal with that? The only thing I can really relate the Night's Watch to in reason of it is it's kind of like their it's kind of like a Crusader type deal. The Night's Watch, I see, you know, like it's kind of hard to pin down. They say a lot of politics and whatnot, but I mean, why is he taking on pages if the Lord Commander doesn't make you a part of that? I mean, because the Knight is a part of the feudal class. It's the lowest level of nobility, but still, you know, I mean, I don't understand why he starts to adopt this structure there. Am I off on that? I mean, I believe he takes some Free Folk as pages.
Yeah, so you have to understand where John is trying to come from in this. John is the person who has made this huge gamble to get the Free Folks south of the Wall. He is seen as being this great rule breaker, in fact, covenant breaker. This is the whole point of what the Night's Watch were about, was to stop the wildlings coming south. This is what a lot of people are thinking. So John's thought is, how do I integrate these people into what's going on around them? And I think that his first thought, well, let's try and give them some sort of job to make them part of the infrastructure of what's going on here, rather than just like saying, oh, go off there, you go and have this land. That would feel like an invasion. Actually try to integrate them within the structure. And frankly, he also will be wanting to get as many people at the wall who could pick up a sword or something like that and help defend it, because he's also got this thought about how does he try and defend the wall against whatever's going to be coming at it at some point. So there's a number of different levels going on there. I think calling people pages or whatever, I think is probably just not that he's suddenly had taken this great turn to loving the knighthood, but it's a thing that he understood what it was, and that everybody around him understood what it was, and he himself will have seen when he was a steward to the previous Lord Commander Jeor Mormont, that he learned a lot from doing that. He clearly couldn't suddenly make all these wildlings, the young wildlings, become members of the Night's Watch. They wouldn't do that. So he had to give them some other position. So there were a lot of things going on there. I think it was just a pure pragmatism and practicality to try and get some sort of integration going on.
So he sees the usefulness in the structure, which I think says a lot about the knighthood in general. And what my particular bone to pick with it is that, again, I just see the usefulness in a universal structure, because that's what Jon is utilizing there. He's like, okay, obviously there's no difference if I just make this kid a steward, or I'm going to teach these kids how to fight anyways. But if I put a title on them that people are going to recognize, they're going to start seeing them as, you know, not as barbarians per se, the wildlings. They're going to start seeing them maybe as one of them. So, I mean, Jon, yes, you know, he's using this language to unify more than, yeah, probably that he's not a sudden embracing the knighthood by any means, but I just find it interesting. I don't want to go on for too long about it, but do you think that there's any particular classes throughout the Seven Kingdoms, in Essos included? Let's put in the Dothraki, and then you have your obviously you have your Bravosi. I believe they are called, what is the proper name for their fighters? They are Wind.
I can't remember, to be honest.
It's Wind something. Jorah faces one in the pits in the I think it's Water Dancers.
Oh yeah, Water Dancers.
Water Dancers.
Yeah, so like Syria Pharrell, yeah.
Yeah, you have Water Dancers. You have I think, isn't there's Dothraki. There's the Dothraki, but then I believe there's a warrior priest of some sort from Essos as well. Do you see any particular structured warrior class in Essos, Westeros, the whole world, more fit for battle than another? Or do you think it's just putting a title on the same thing?
Now, this is completely horses for courses. It's each of the different kinds of troop has got a different strength. It's the same over in Westeros and Essos in that world as it is here. So if you are in a huge plains area, you want to be on horseback, you want to be very mobile, you want to be able to shoot from on horseback. That's why the Dothraki are as they are. If you are doing city warfare where you might be laying siege to somewhere or defending a city, then what you want is an incredibly well-trained infantry who can follow orders exactly and do not break rank. And that is why we have the Unsullied, who have been developed to take on that role. The Knights have got this incredibly strong martial prowess, but frankly, they're dressed head to foot in armor. That does not work in Dawn or huge parts of the Red Waste. You'll find Jorah started out trying to wear his armor when he was over in Essos, and sooner or later he started to realize, you know what, this isn't working for me. He's got to slightly adapt his style. And so everywhere you go, you get slightly different types of fighters who are suited to slightly different types of things. And so if you're wanting a well-rounded army, then you use all of these in the right way for the right purposes. The Knights are great in the sort of the middle bit of Westeros, where you've got in the Riverlands, where they do most of their work. When you get onto more mountainous terrain, more woody terrain, the Knights aren't going to be very helpful. This is how you were talking earlier about the hill tribes over in the Vale. How on earth could they survive if you've got these great knights in the Vale? Because knights don't work very well on mountains and in hills and with lots of trees everywhere. So that's how they survived, because that's a completely different need that's going on there. So everywhere you go, you get slightly different forces, and you can argue that one is better than another, but it really depends on the context of where they're fighting and who they're fighting and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, if everybody's going to go and break lance with each other, like the Knights are going to want, they're going to want and have a formal battle. And you do see it to a point until the dragon trumps everything in last season. You know, you do see the Dothraki, and they do hold the line. The Lannister footmen, they hold that line against the Dothraki, which is a pretty formidable force. So I really like that mashup, and I always love it too, because that's like what we were kind of promised in the first season. You know, how confident Ned is. He's like, we'll throw him back in the sea, but then, you know, the damn dragon comes. But it's kind of hard to say, and it's very true that I think that every warrior class is just adapt to what their geography dictates, and also what their adversary dictates. Like the Unsullied are the answer to the Dothraki and so forth. You know, like, but part of being a knight, you do learn masonry, at least in the real world. They learn masonry because they needed to learn how to build their stronghold. So there was, you know, stuff, but I just can't imagine again that these guys in the North aren't learning the same exact stuff, that they're just letting them go. And they're like, well, you know, it's all good. We're just going to be tough. So, I mean, I know it's not loose. I see a lot of people here saying I'm Cersei. I disagree with that. I wouldn't have blown up the Sept. I think that's a bad move. I don't see how more people aren't upset about that. I mean, yes, Stannis is burning kids and burning totems, but she pretty much blew up the freaking 16th chapel there. The Vatican. And she seems to just kind of be rolling with that. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I would definitely be going for Stannis and showing some support for good old Stannis, and we'll see how he works out in the books. But yeah, I mean, when it comes down to it, when you have all these different fighting classes and stuff, I mean, I think that what's his name speaks to it as well. He's now in Marine, running it probably very poorly. He is Danny's lover that has to stay there. I'm blanking on. What is his name again? Dario, yes. He talks about how when he went over, he learned how to all these different fighting styles like you spoke of. And Jorah, again, more so in the books, has to adapt. I mean, they do show his armor working out for him quite hysterically in the show in the first season. But yeah, it's not too advantageous. I think that it'd be fair to say that George is subverting the White Knight trope, but I don't think he's using the North to do so. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, he is. He's using it, and we're coming back to the beginning here with Brienne and also with Sandor. I think that we're seeing that the people who are showing the most knightly virtues have not been recognized as being knights, or have been excluded from being knights. And that, to a degree, probably does include Jon to a certain extent, because he was not made a knight. But what the narrative is doing is it is pushing these people into the positions where they are, in effect, taking on the knightly role. Jon, as Lord Commander, is a knightly role. Brienne has taken on the knightly role. In fact, in effect, has become a knight. Sandor the Hound, he is becoming a protector of the weak. And that is, again, a knightly role. So I think what we're going to see is that as we come towards the end, it's not what people's titles are, it's who the people are and what they're about that is most important. And they, the cripples, bastards, and broken things, will be the people who inherit the world at the end of it.
Yeah, I just think that, I mean, I do agree. I just think it's interesting that they do choose to pick the ones that do subvert it to not be Northerners. So, I mean, Brienne's not a Northerner. In the Hound of House Clegane, I know that they are obviously a vassal of the Lannisters for all of their wonderful deeds. But what was the Hound technically to Joffrey? He wasn't Kingsguard. He was just a bodyguard. I mean,
yeah, so he was an anomaly. So he started out being effectively a bodyguard. He then got promoted to within the King's Guard by Joffrey when Joffrey was king, but he was technically not a knight. So, as I say, he was an anomaly, but he was allowed to be that because the king decided it. And in that system, what the king said happened.
Yeah, but yeah, I do agree. It's going to come down to, you know, obviously, I mean, I think the best example of knighthood that we have other than Barristan is Brienne, no doubt. And I think Jaime will come true to it. And it's all about what is an honorable person in a dishonorable society and so forth. Jaime, everybody's honor fucks them in one way or another in this book, in series. Ned's honor screws him. Jamie's honor screwed. I mean, everybody has honor to a point, and honoring an oath here and an oath there, and it doesn't work out. Now it's starting to come back around, because in order to subvert expectations, you must set them. But I just find it fascinating, and I will admit that I get caught up in reading about the famous Knights of Westeros, but now maybe I'll think about it more so in the way, like you're saying, of the history is written by these maesters. Who, yeah, I mean, what was the one saying in last season that he was writing about when there's fucking dragons invading Westeros, and he's writing about Robert's rebellion? Like, nobody's paying attention to what's going on. But yeah, I always have that last scene, or one of the last scenes, hopefully, in my mind, that that they're gonna be, Sam is gonna be pulling them by the ear and making them look at all of the death and all of the actual happenings and saying, write about this, you know, because we don't know how jaded this history is, just like our own history, sad to say. But yeah, I mean, I really appreciate you coming on. I love talking about game. Did we get more Game of Thrones news today? I was doing my trailer video, and I heard that we got maybe a confirmation on the Doom.
As I understand it, I've not read all the articles. There are rumors of what one of the other 3 in production potential spin-offs is. These seem to be pretty substantive rumors, but they are still just rumors. So yeah, that's what we've got. I don't think we've had anything official confirmed yet, other than, of course, end of filming.
Yeah, Arya with her bloody sneakers. That just sends me all sorts of mixed messages right there. I mean, if that was anything for real, she'd be the HBO snipers would have her ass. But I find it to be very interesting. I'm sadly holding out, and I've changed opinions quite a bit from a year ago, that for a Gendry and Arya wedding, and I hope it happens. But hey, you know, I love my faceless men theories because they can't be wrong. I appreciate you as always, Robert. When are you officially launching The Well Told Tale?
That is a week tomorrow that is launching. And if anyone doesn't know, I will take that as my opportunity to plug it. My new channel, The Well Told Tale, is hopefully somebody can drop a link there into the chat. It's going to be me reading stories, reading novels, the best science fiction, fantasy, speculative fiction stories ever written. So we're going to start with The War of the Worlds, then we're going to do Frankenstein, and we're going to move on from that. It's going to be 1 episode a week. It's going to be long form, so it's going to be at least half an hour per episode, maybe up to an hour. I'm going to make sure within the episode there will be no adverts, so it doesn't get interrupted by adverts partway through, and it's just going to be the story. I'll just introduce it and then just the stories. And I'm really looking forward to this. This is something that people have been asking me to do for a long time, and so I'm very excited to get the chance to do this. And I'm going to see whether I can branch this out a little bit, perhaps having setting it up as a podcast in a few weeks' time as well. But we'll see. So anyway, a week on Wednesday, The Well Told Tale. It'd be fantastic if you want to check that one out.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to check it out. Like I said, I've already going to have the competitor channel for you, the slightly, well, vastly less well-told tale, and you can tell by the phrasing of that sentence how poorly the tale will be told. That will be done by me. It'll be done by me very inconsistently. There'll be nothing but advertisements, a lot of me reading advertisements. And yeah, it's just, you know, if you don't want a story to be told to you in a way that you're really going to enjoy it or anything like that, and just basically, you know, subverting the whole trope of the well-told tale, as I like to do. You know, you can come over to my channel where I will be reading all copyrighted stuff and mostly just copy from like Geico and stuff like that. So you can save a lot on your car insurance. No, I can't. I think that that's a brilliant idea. People are going to love it. I watch your videos all the time, and I just love the way you just explain stuff that even things I already know. I just like listening to your voice. So, hey, you know, I'm not an ASMR, but that's about as close as it's going to get. I can't thank you enough. I mean, we got quite a bit until Westworld comes back around, and I really hope that they are doing some thinking about what they did this season, because you know I'm not very happy about it. And I hope they're going to come back strong, but it's going to be a good 2 years. But I think we're going to have plenty of Game of Thrones, probably forever. I think that it's not going anywhere, and I can't wait. I think that it is confirmed that they are going to start filming in October for Age of the Heroes. I think that is confirmed.
Oh, really? As I say, I haven't read any of the articles today, so I don't know, but that's really exciting if true.
HBO is just literally they're on balconies throwing money at Game of Thrones. So yeah, they're not looking to give that up anytime soon. Yeah, but I can't thank you enough. I'm looking to do more Game of Thrones. I have the history of the trailer, which I did a whole history of the from the first trailer on that started in 1913. That was a trailer for a Broadway play called Pleasure Seekers. Not as dirty as it sounds, and did that whole video, and that is ready to be uploaded anytime my computer will upload it. So I hope you guys subscribe. I hope somebody will put a link. If not, I will put it in the comments below for a well-told tale, or a tale well. Is it a tale well told?
It's the well-told tale. If you go to YouTube and you just type the well-told tale, it will come up.
Yeah, put that in. Put that in, you'll get it. No, we'll put it there. So yeah, I can't thank you enough, Robert. You've been a good friend, and your knowledge is always appreciated, and I can't wait for you to read me some Narnia. Thank you, everybody, for coming. We'll be doing some more Game of Thrones streams as they come, and I will have my project coming out that is the evolution of the trailer. And I'm going to be doing more, just more production-centric videos in general. I'm going to be breaking down just the actual jobs of film crews, from director to script supervisor to even producer and executive producer, and the different roles that they do take. Because I think that it, especially in the climate lately, a lot of people are asking, unfortunately, for not the best reasons, what some of these people do on set. But I think that the film industry, and that goes for the television industry as well, because it's arguably bigger right now with HBO and whatnot. But I think that talking about the behind the scenes is just as interesting as talking about stories sometimes, and something I have actual experience in. So I can't wait to do it. Hopefully I'll have my video up that was supposed to be up 2 hours ago. And thank you guys for coming. Make sure to subscribe to both the channels, and we will see you guys